Hello, everybody. This is Brad Swift, and this is Gaia's Call 2.0. And this is a memorable day for us because, as you may see on the video, if you're watching this on video, we have our first guest. And I'm not going to say who it is yet because I'm going to let my co-host, the beautiful and talented and very smart Marla Leese, introduce our guest in just a moment. But first, let me just say, hey, Marla, how are you doing today? And where are you today?
Hi, Brad. Yes, I am now not in Singapore anymore. I'm in Sri Lanka. Crazily enough, I'm in exactly the same room that I've met Brad and Katharine 2 years ago online. And so excited today to have you both here with me and in this room and in one of my favorite countries in the world. And I spent the day at the ocean and now I'm here. Like I'm buzzing. So yeah, so I have the great honor to introduce Katharine, our first interviewee of the podcast that we're doing. So, Katharine has been an educator for over 30 years. She's an IB educator and author of a book called Earthwords. So, Katharine, maybe I'll leave you to introduce yourself and all the amazing things that you've been doing.
Well, first of all, Marlies, I want to say that I'm really honored um, to be with you because I've been watching your development as well, and it's exciting to me to see all that. So, um, yeah, you said an IB educator. I'm now retired, although I was in IB education for over 30 years. Um, and I didn't start out to be an ecologist. I started out to be an English as a second language teacher of all things. And I taught, English as a second language for many, many years, and kind of took different opportunities to teach different things when they came up. And then when I had the opportunity to do a master's in ecology, sustainability, and nature, that's when I did that, and that shifted my perceptions, which is what I write about, is how do we shift our perceptions of who we are in relation to the rest of the natural world. And before this, I cared about nature. I liked going out for walks, um, but I didn't have this other perception of who we are as humans. And that was a shift for me that led to a shift in my work and to the book Earthwords Transformative Ecological Education. So, and I started the master's in 2018 and finished in 2021. So it hasn't been a long time, but it's been a fantastic journey.
Yeah, so that's a great like advocate of lifelong learning, and I guess
Yeah.
you also talk about in your posts and things on social media that how do you think that schools are doing too much, which is strange because we're all lifelong learners. I know me and Brad have been changing degrees and careers most of our lives, and now you've done a master's in the 2021s, and so yeah, so you suggested schools do too much. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that was actually a post that I wrote in 2018. And um and I meant the title to be provocative because the full title is Are Schools Doing Too Much to Save the Planet? But my emphasis was on doing, because I think it's wonderful to do things. It's wonderful to encourage young people to do things, but it needs to come from a place of understanding first who we are in relation to the rest of the world. Because otherwise, I see and I saw through many years of working with young people a lot of things that are performative. I would call it performative, where and it's not a teacher's fault because they're looking for, suggestions on what to do, and the things they find are things like go out and pick up plastic. So they go out and pick up plastic and they say, let's make a plastic statue. And I have seen so many plastic statues. And the students do it because it's something to do. It's maybe more fun than sitting at their desks. It's a time to sort of maybe even chat with their friends and be creative and lots of other things. But it isn't shifting perceptions a lot of times. Sometimes it does. And often there is a student who is, who is perceptive and who sees a lot of plastic and feels something about it, but sometimes there isn't. So the question is, how do we move from doing, performing to being?
Yeah.
to being and understanding our being in the world.
So how do we do
And then
that?
action comes from that.
How
How
do
do
we
we
do
do
that?
that?
Because I know me
Yeah.
and Dad both have a background in, as I did animal science, he did veterinary science, and you started as an
Mm,
English teacher. So I mean, how did you? So I guess like the two of us, we were already in the ecological world and conservation world from a younger age.
mm, mm.
But you came from an ESL teacher to this. So for the kids that are, now in the education system, how do we do this? How do we not
Yeah. Yeah.
make it a performance?
Um, I think, well, first of all, my master's was looking at teachers and how they had developed this deeper ecological consciousness and awareness. And I was working with a model from a professor, Stephen Harding from Schumacher College. And he was looking at more than academic knowing, because we so often tell students academic stuff, right? Tell them about the climate, tell them about global warming. Whereas I think as humans, we have many other ways of knowing, emotional knowing and experiential knowing and even intuitive knowing. And developing those skills in students, I'm not sure if I should even call them skills, just aptitudes, just ways of being in students, and in ourselves helps us to see the whole world differently, I think. So that's one thing that I noticed with the teachers that I was interviewing for my master's, was almost all of them talked about a time in nature where they had what I would call an encounter, a very different experience that made them say, wow, this is amazing. This is beautiful. I see you nodding. Probably you've had that too, right? And when that happens, things shift. So then the idea becomes, and what the book is about, is where do we create the possibilities for that to happen within the schools we have, even within the curriculums we have, because we can't change everything all at once. So
Uh-oh.
what is it that we can do with a social studies class, right? That helps students to become aware of our deeper, and I like to use the word inseparability from the rest of the living world.
Yeah, so just for people watching, we are still dealing with technical issues. Sorry. We're also all from all over the world at the moment. Brad is in North Carolina, Catherine's in Norway.
Norway. Mm.
Norway, and I'm in Sri Lanka, so please deal with the technical issues. But I wanted to know, like, what was your, like, incident? Like,
Ah,
what was your,
that's such an interesting question. Yeah, because that's very interesting, because I actually had I had the secretary at my school. She said that to me one time. I was talking to her and she goes, "Well, what was yours?" And I was like, "Oh my, I don't know." But I know a few um really deep experiences. I'd have to say that I began to be interested in the idea of sustainability because of my students. Young students are honest, you know? And they say things like, well, why do we do it this way? Why don't we change? And they, propelled me to think, because they're just straight, right? So that was like a first thing to start thinking. I remember I had a student who said, we're talking about used clothing and new clothing. Well, why do we keep buying new clothing? So I stopped. And I said, okay, I'll stop. They're like, forever? I was like, why not? And, so I started doing things first, but then when just before I did my master's, I had a summer at Schumacher College with Stephen Harding. And I really think that that was a turning point for me, because um, he took us on what is called a deep time walk.
yes,
And I still lead these. You've done this. It's a 4.6
yeah,
kilometer walk where we walk through time. And it's a beautiful experience.
we walked through
Yeah.
4.6
And I
billion
remember,
years.
what's that?
We walked through 4.6 billion years in 4.6 kilometers. I'm not
Yes,
really
of
familiar
life's
with that. Yeah,
existence. I
amazing.
love it. I love it. And interestingly, I had started to create my own because I had read a book by Arne Ness. And I started questioning, well, how do we develop this ecological self? Exactly the question you're asking. And as I was questioning this, I did some Googling, as one does, and I found this thing about a deep time walk. I was like, I want to make one. And I actually invited friends here, and we did one. And I did it from the standpoint of, imagine that you are a speck of dust revolving around the young sun. And so we did it like that. We were becoming all of this. And I loved it and they loved it. And it began to shift things inside me and began to make me think about, like, even if I drink a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, where is this coming from in the world? What are all the systems and all the natural growth that's going on somewhere far away and all the humans involved? And this began to be a way I was thinking about everything I was doing, right? And then that began to shift. Then I took my master's, and the rest, as I said, is history. So,
It's really
yeah.
interesting because there's a book called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he talks very much about this
Yes.
interconnectedness and how we are interbeing and we inter are. One of the examples is very much like if you have a glass of orange juice, where is this, who has been involved in getting this to you? Like how have these seeds been grown and the oranges that have been part of that whole process. So that's really cool. But
I read Thich Nhat Hanh's. Oh, sorry.
Yay,
I read Thich Nhat Hanh's Love Letter to the Earth.
right.
Was one of my very early eye openers too. Yeah. So
There's
I think you can reach it
as
from, yeah.
well. There's a meditation that he does for that. Love letter to the earth.
Yes, the paper. Yeah.
It's just a recording. It's good. It's a recording. Yeah.
Ah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
But I wanted to ask, like, it's like some people who become so ecologically connected or start to think about like how everything is connected, start to get paralyzed. Because suddenly it becomes so big that we get overwhelmed with how much of a mess that we've put ourselves in. Because now we start asking the questions and start critically thinking about, oh my goodness, like this is affecting this and that and the other. And especially, I guess, with students and their carers and their parents and their teachers that might not, be equipped to handle these kinds of explanations or questions. Yeah, how do you feel like when that happens, or have you had experiences of students or parents or carers or teachers leading more to paralysis and being like, oh my goodness, this is too big for me, I can't do anything.
Well, let me preface it by talking about, like, for us, because I'm also, I didn't mention this, but I'm a practitioner of the work that reconnects, which is Joanna Macy's work. I don't know if you know it, but it's a spiral of reconnection, although I don't believe in reconnection because we are not separate, but of acknowledging inseparability, let's say. And she says that, we need to acknowledge our grief. The problem is that in our societies today, we don't have ways to do that anymore, right? We don't have those rituals. We don't have those communal opportunities, and we need to build them. So the work that reconnects, I think, is a beautiful practice for doing that, first of all. And all of us sometimes I face grief, right? Joanna said that the amount of grief that we have is the signal of how much we love. And I love that phrase. And she also teaches some things, just one small exercise is breathing through, breathing into the pain and through the pain, and doing this communally. So she has lots and lots of practices. I haven't done many of her practices with young people, but I've had the experience through the years because as teachers of, a teacher of geography and social studies, you're teaching climate change and watching the changes in the students. And it's more than grief. I see students in grief, but more and more I see students in apathy. Because how do you respond, when you're being told over and over again and it's too big for you and you're not being given the tools to deal with it, right? So I watch students move from, we are Greta, we're going to change the world, to, we are angry at you. You created this mess for us, to, I had a student, this was my turning point just before I started my master's. I had a student, and I can never tell the story without crying. And we were discussing what we would call our generation. And he said to me, we are the generation not much longer. And he looked me straight in the eyes when he said it. And I was like, I became an activist. It shifted me. And then I had another student who said to me once, Miss, do you think we're going extinct? And this is it's a terrible thing to hear from a 16-year-old. And at the time, I didn't feel like I answered it so well. I was like, well, we're a creative species, you know, all those things you say. And, you know, we have opportunities and we need to take them. Uh, and then, of course, that became a chapter in my book where I was like, how do we really answer this? How do we look at how we can, um, in community and with the strengths that we have as humans, face what we are facing and become those new humans that we need to be, those humans that can care for the earth and can understand our inseparability, and then develop a sense of reciprocity and care.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely see it in students. Um, when I have talked in schools about what to do, I often have administrators say, "Oh, we can't do that. They can go to a counselor. Oh no, that's not, because they also don't know how to deal with that." So, I think one thing is talking with schools about how this is part of our charge, these young people's mental health and our own mental health. And so, one of the things I say early in the book is we need to talk about it. We must talk about it, right? Katharine Hayhoe says that when we talk about it, we discover that everybody else is also feeling what we're feeling, but we think we're completely alone in it. Um, so that I think is a first step.
which
Yeah.
is part of the reason we're having this
Yeah,
conversation
exactly.
and
And also me
Indeed.
and Brad both
talking about it.
write about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I want to include one other thing in here. As I was preparing for our conversation today, which I'm loving the conversation, by the way, I looked up the whole etymology of the word education and educate, because I knew, I kind of had read and heard before about what it really means. And it says, what I found was it says physiologically, phys philosophically, wow, that's a big word. Education is the process of drawing out a person's latent potential rather than
Mm,
simply pouring in information. And
mhm,
and with me, I hear this and it's like um, everything that I hear these days is filtered through. I've got almost 5-year-old grandson and an almost 3-year-old granddaughter, and so everything is going like that. It's like maybe maybe it's more about helping them to remember. Maybe they have
yes.
a much greater sense of belonging to Earth than we do.
Yes.
And maybe it's, our job is more to help draw out their latent potential than to pour more information in there. So I'd like for you to respond to that.
Well, I love that because I have a 7-year-old grandson and a 3-year-old grandson and an almost 3-year-old granddaughter. So, and I would say that children are naturally understand. I love etymology, by the way, and the etymology of the word human is something I love because if you go back to the Indo-European, it means those of the earth, and it's related to the word humus, soil,
Mm,
right? Not the hummus that we eat, but the hummus that's soil. And it's also related to the word humble and the word humane, of course, right? So, so I think that children automatically have that knowing that we are people of the earth. Um, and and I think we unschool them. I think we school it out of them, frankly.
mhm.
And so maybe, like you say, I also love the word remember because membering is belonging, right? That we remember. They are already membering. Maybe we're the ones who need to remember around them, right? And I really do think young children can teach us. You often see this. Um, and my grandchildren, I see they start, nursery school and then they start coming back with all the I don't know, fantastic characters, and I don't even know what's the biggest one right now, but what they've watched on cartoons or TV or this or that. So yeah. So
Yeah,
just don't unschool them.
I also want to add to that because today in Sri Lanka there's this word called abaya bhumi. I hope I said it right, abaya bhumi,
Mm,
which is literally how Sri Lanka was kind of the policies and the laws and of the olden days were created based on this. And abaya bhumi means a message of responsibility towards the protection of all living beings and our natural heritage. And I learned that today.
Mm,
And that's kind of what you guys are saying, because like if you look at all the indigenous kind of cultures and tribes and teachings, it was always
mhm,
very connected to nature, and you
mhm,
always had a place with the folklore and the songs and the community and the connection and
mhm.
reciprocity, which is also what
Yes.
me and Brad write about. Like in my book, The Dreams of Unwritten Futures, we talk very much about reciprocity and how, we can go back to that. And Brad also writes for kids in his Zach Bates series.
Wonderful.
But
Excellent.
yes, it's us, the adults, that are moving them away from that. Something that we
Mm,
possibly all, I mean, I don't remember my childhood at all, but like maybe that we all inherently already knew, like, like
mm,
nature versus nurture thing, where if you put a kid in front of a snake, they're not going to run away screaming. They'll just be like, oh, thing.
mm,
Where we teach them, oh,
mm.
snake's dangerous, slimy, even though they're not slimy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly. Mm,
yeah, maybe
mm,
that's totally on us that we need to remember
mm,
as well while we teach them.
mm, mm.
Mm.
Indeed, I think so.
The other piece that's
Question.
really fresh in my mind right now is we're exploring my daughter's family moving much closer to us, maybe even where we're currently living. And there's a whole question about the educational system. I want to be able to, uh, uh, I'm not advocating my responsibility as the grandparent to the school. And at the
Mhm,
same time, they're going to spend, 6, 7 hours, 5 days a week in school for much of their life. How do you, how do we introduce this whole idea of being interconnected with the earth so intricately to
mhm,
school system that's all about testing and credentialing and all the things that, in my estimate, points to a somewhat broken system.
you know, yeah, it's a broken system that's part of a broken system, isn't it? So, yeah, and I've talked with some people who say, well, we can't work in the schools. I mean, they're broken, they're failed institutions. And this is partially true, but it's also what we have. So I'm an advocate for starting where we are. And I often say because we can't start anywhere else. But Bayo Komolafe also has he has this podcast where he says, you can't get there from here. And he tells the old Irish story about, meeting tourists and saying, well, you can't get there from here. So this is also true. So the question is, how do we start from here and then also recognize that we need to do things in different ways? And a lot of times it isn't going to happen from the administration, and it isn't going to happen from the the board because they are tied into, creating or giving results and passing those on and often pleasing parents who want a particular kind of education and so on and so forth. So for me, the response has been to work with teachers who are ready. And it's really interesting because in my own case, I didn't start out to write a book at all. I gave a presentation for the IB, and I think it was called a new paradigm, a new ecological paradigm for schools.
Mm.
And when I did, there was somebody in your neck of the woods, Marlies, who is named um, oh, can't remember his name right now, but he's a writer, and I'll think of him in a minute. And he said to me, you ought to write a book. And I was like, oh, I've just finished a master's. And he goes, well, if you can do a master's, you can do a book. And I was like, oh no. But I but I talked to my headmaster who said, well, if you want to present to the teachers, you can. So I did. And it was like, is anybody interested in this project? In seeing where it goes? There wasn't any end point at the time. But there were 15 teachers who showed interest, and then there were 8 who followed through. So the book is the story is it I'm not the author of the book. The book is the story of all of these different teachers in their own subject matters, in their own grade levels, in their own passions, whether it was for composting or for going into the wilderness, and how that began to play out as we began to explore with it, right? And I often quote Michelle Holiday, who says that we create practice grounds. I think this is super important, you know? So take that first step and create those practice grounds. And when I'm doing book circles or teaching, I say, find your tribe, you know, and find the others who would like to try and then start to do it. We didn't get any time off for the projects that we developed. We didn't get paid for the projects we developed. We didn't get, any extras, but we were allowed to start a garden, which we did. And then, and I think that was like one of the most important things because then teachers started taking their students out into the garden. And so I would say find a school with a garden, first of all. But then that garden can't just become performative, which is also easy for that to happen. We're going to go and put the seeds here and go out, you know. And then find the people who are wondering, who are thinking, who are beginning to make those connections. And in our case, not every single teacher was, a deep ecologist when the project started, but many of them shifted their understandings over the course of their projects and also deepened their initiatives later on and changed what they were doing in the class and in the garden. So, and they're tiny stories with tiny steps. So the book is only the beginning of an initiative that needs to go on and on and on. And now that I'm not with the school, I don't know all the time what is growing and what is not growing. But I also like to say that all of this is a little bit like the ecological theory of succession. So when you look at succession in a place where it's a desert or there's been a fire or something, you'll see that things begin to grow and some things will start to grow and then die out, but they will create new compost for something else to grow that you didn't expect. And then once in a while, there'll be a plant that just goes crazy and finds its niche and like really like you two with this podcast, right? And then there's another place where maybe something stops and then something else grows in its place. So you can't say about, in a complex system, you can't say at any time that one thing needs to continue exactly the way it's continuing.
Yeah.
Everything is shifting and changing all the time. So that's another thing that I suggest. Take your step where you are. Find the teachers that have that love and encourage them to find each other.
That's a perfect response because it really follows with nature. Oh, you mean to bring nature back to the schools is to follow the principles of nature.
Yeah.
Ah, how smart.
Yeah. But
And we're going to have to
just in the interest of
bring this to an end
time.
and see when we can have you come back because I don't think the conversation's over, but
Yeah. But just in the interest of time, like I would like you to like maybe leave our listeners with one last thing. So in the deep time walk, there are three situations, three scenarios when we finish the time walk, right? It's either business as usual or the great unraveling or the great turning. And the great unraveling is literally when everything falls apart and unravels, and we're hoping not to get to that stage. But there's this thing called the great turning where we all kind of move away from the Anthropocene, which we're in now, where we all think we are better than nature. Oh my God. Better than nature.
Awesome.
Disconnected.
I'll just say, Marilise, that those three scenarios that you're mentioning, those are from the work that reconnects. That's from Joanna Macy's 3 stories. So I recognize them immediately. I'm sorry. I hope you feeling better?
Yes. So what do we do?
How do we reach the great turning? Yes. We keep telling the stories. One thing I think we do. I think we keep telling the stories, and this is a place where the stories are being told, right? So that makes this a sacred space in my mind. And I think we keep telling the stories forward, and we keep finding the others that are moving that direction. And we recognize, I think that there's a messy middle.
Yeah.
I think we need to recognize that, the great turning is not going to be something that like turning the page. There is a messy middle and we're in it. Daniel Schmachtenberger has a lovely, lovely phrase where he says, you know, when you fall hard on one, and I think we are in a shift. So if we can remember that when we find the messiness, right? Or when we see the polarization, this is a phase shift. We take where we are. And also, I'll quote one more person, Beth Saul, and she says, you know, all step, but not the only person in the dance. There are many others in the dance taking their steps, right? So when we all take our steps together, that's when we move forward.
Very
Yeah.
important. Yeah, when you're referring to the messiness, I was thinking about butterfly is being, the caterpillar is being transformed into the beautiful butterfly, and we're in the cocoon right now, in the messiness. Um, and I actually pray that I'm around long enough to see the butterfly.
Right. Well,
Thank you, Catherine. This was
we're
an
all in
extraordinary
You know about,
conversation.
well,
And
it's called the imaginal space, imaginal cells that
yes,
in this liminal space. So that's
yes,
yes, that's what I was going to say, the imaginal
yes.
cells. I had
yeah.
to,
Yes,
that's
but
it.
thank you so much,
Lovely.
Catherine, for now that I can speak again. Thank you so much for being here and for all your wisdom. And yes, I think we should do a part 2 of this because we have so much more to ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your time and all your wisdom
It's so much fun to talk.
and your book. Yes, I'm sure we could go on for hours.
So
Thank
if
you very
you are
much.
an eco-conscious family member, with or without children, and this conversation resonates with you, please share it. And if you know of other guests that you think would be useful, valuable for us to have a conversation with, please share them as well. And until next time, this is Brad and Marla, and this time Catherine, signing off with Gaz 2.0.